When Tom asked me to do this, I first didn't recognize the name of the filmmaker, Johnny Symons, and then I remembered as a college student I had participated in a student film that was very abstract and very bizarre, and involved crawling through the California desert, shot in black and white film. And I played a man who mysteriously and cruelly refused to give a bowl of water to this man who was crawling through the California desert. And it was an experimental film, and it was, in the truest sense, completely pointless and meaningless. And I'm happy to say that Johnny Symons wasn't the director of that film. He was the man who was crawling through the desert and didn't get any water. So I was very pleased to see, as he's gone on in his film career, that he's making films that are very meaningful to a great many people, and I was very excited to see his work this evening. I've been an editor in the gay press now since 1996. I actually began this work, and began that work in North Carolina, where I edited their gay newspaper. And one of the first couples that I met there who raised children were two people living in rural North Carolina, one of whom was a transgendered FTM, a person who had been born female and was now living as a man, and his partner, one of whom was, I can't remember which of the two, was the pastor of the local Metropolitan Community Church, and they had adopted two children, both of whom were special needs kids, through a Baptist adoption agency. So when I met them, I said, wow, I'm very surprised that you were able to adopt these children, particularly through a Baptist adoption agency. How were you able to make that possible? And they said to me, oh, it's easy. They didn't ask and we didn't tell. Which, you know, was certainly good for them and then allowed them to create the family that they wanted, but I think was also very hard on them that they couldn't be open in their lives with the children that they were raising. So as we ask questions of the folks on the panel this evening, I wanted to remind folks that it does take a tremendous amount of courage not only to be a parent, but particularly to be an openly gay parent. And so I really thank the folks on the panel for stepping forward and being willing to talk about their experiences. So I wanted to start with a couple of questions for the folks on the panel, and then as folks feel moved, please move to the microphone and we'll just go through questions and comments as they become available. And one thing I wanted to touch on first is that, as was mentioned in the introduction, Arlene is not only a stellar parent, but a stellar activist, and is someone who is kind of very much at the forefront of protecting and promoting gay rights in the state legislature here. And so I wanted to ask Arlene, as a parent, actually, instead of an advocate, how you feel today in Massachusetts. Do you feel protected as a parent? And do you feel like there are risks for you, either legally or socially, being a parent in the state?
Sometimes there's lack of knowledge can be a real blessing, and doing a lot of work in gay and lesbian politics has resulted in my realizing how very vulnerable we are as a population of parents, and in particular realizing that were I to be hit by a car and die tomorrow, my partner would be severely disadvantaged in her ability to take care of our children and our family, because we're not allowed to marry, we're not allowed to have civil unions, we're limited in the kinds of domestic partner benefits we can have. In that panoply of some 1,400 plus benefits, rights, and responsibilities that we would have were we allowed to marry, don't exist for us. So the kids are vulnerable. Having said that, I also realize that we live in a state which is arguably a bit more pro-gay than others. Not nearly as pro-gay as folks think, but a bit more, so that we've at least have adoption rights, which so many other states don't have.
I also wanted to ask Bill and Steve, one of the things that they had mentioned to me before this is that what is most eye-popping to a lot of folks when they say that they're parents is not that they are gay parents, but they are parents to 5 children, which is unusual in today's society. And so I wanted to ask the two of you, clearly you have a strong drive towards parenting, and in both of your experiences being gay men, is being a parent something that you envisioned doing prior to becoming openly gay, and how has that process of being an openly gay person affected your desire to parent?
Actually, the process was very different for both of us. I always wanted to be a parent. I actually always wanted to be a mother. I really envied the role that women had in our society. I thought that they were very lucky. And when I realized that I was gay, I, at that point, honestly, truly believed I would never get to be a parent. But as I grew, along with my coming out process and got more and more involved in the gay community, I realized that it was definitely a possibility and something that I would pursue. And here I sit with 5 children. So,
like Steve, when I always wanted to have a family, but then when I realized I was gay, I thought that was something that was not open to me anymore, and had kind of put that out of my mind. And then I had met Steve, and he was in the process of adopting Ben, who is now our oldest child, and he had gone down, applied, and started the process as a single parent. And he said, I just want you to know that this is what I'm doing before we get involved. And I was so incredibly intrigued, and that kind of relit the fire that was there. So I didn't realize it was going to turn into an inferno, but it's been a great journey.
And I believe of the folks on the panel, you have the oldest child in Ben, who I think you said is nearly 16. Mm-hmm. And you adopted Ben when he was how old?
5.
So you've been parents to Ben for a long time as well. Mm-hmm. During that period, what's been the most difficult or sort of the most enjoyable challenge in raising a child as 2 gay fathers?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things going through my mind. I guess I'd like to comment, I don't know if it's going to exactly answer your question. I'd like to comment that sitting here watching that movie, I feel like we watched our own lives unfold. We went through almost identical process as many of the scenarios that you saw. If you combine them all, as you can imagine, adopting 5 children, we've hit every scenario possible, ranging from adopting older children to being selected by a birth mother to even be able to be at the birth of a baby. And I was overwhelmed with how emotional I got watching this, and often when I'm asked to speak, when Bill and I speak, or when I'm talking about our family, it's so natural to me. It doesn't feel like a big deal. I'm overwhelmed with figuring out if I have enough groceries for the week and enough diapers, and if I'm going to get everybody to their gymnastics and their karate on time, that I forget that we're gay parents. I forget what a political statement our lives have made. And how emotional I got watching this, I was overwhelmed thinking, how can anybody think that this is wrong? This is absolutely beautiful. And putting any other issues aside, love really does make a difference. So I don't know if I answered your question, but the whole process has been overwhelming with ups and downs. Overwhelmingly wonderful to know that we've given home to children that might never have had a home or may have had very different lives, and I feel like we have a lucky life. We have a great life as a family. And at the same time, realizing how difficult it is to be parents, to be gay parents, and how easy it is as a couple to lose sight of one another when you're taking care of a family of 5 children. So it's overwhelming joy and sorrow.
One of the persons in the movie made a comment that I say a lot to friends, and we were talking about this, that as a parent, as a gay parent, I think about the challenges my kids have, and we have 5 children, as you know. 3 are African American and 2 are white, and especially for my African American kids, I'm like, the challenges they have is having 2 dads, being adopted, and then being, for 2 of them, black men in a white society that's sometimes overwhelming, but totally, completely counterbalanced by the incredible love. Like Steve said, love makes a family, and how natural this all feels and seems, and how we were, we live in the suburbs, and we were prepared for, a fight, I guess, for lack of a better word, that we were going to come into a lot of opposition and a lot of hatred and prejudice, and that really hasn't been the case. And we've been very lucky by being not embraced as much as just, well, hey, these guys are doing, they're raising their family, they're facing the same issues as we are, and we're a little bit different, but we really are just another family in the neighborhood, just struggling and having the same kind of issues as all the other neighbors do. And as a matter of fact, we joke, we have more straight friends, couple friends, than we do gay friends now. I mean, we have more in common, I guess.
I actually think that the more folks get to know gay and lesbian couples who are parents, the more they realize that we're as boring as all the straight parents are, and just a question of getting to know us.
There is no gay.
Never let go of trying to be fabulous.
Well, yeah. But it's really true. There is no gay way to parent. There's no straight way to parent. It's just the issues of parenting, and that point rang out loud and clear in the film we just saw, and that's been our experience.
I do think gay men sometimes have an arguably more difficult time. I think that society, perhaps due to sexism, homophobia, or whatever, are a little bit more inclined to not give you a chance as much as they would a lesbian couple. We found that we had a much easier time being accepted, and people were, sometimes straight folks who want to show how liberal they are will trip over themselves to try and make sure that we know how comfortable they are with us, and quite frankly, we appreciate it, even if it's not always true. They went out of their way to welcome my partner, who at the nursery school is one of the more involved parents, and made her the chair of the board at the nursery school. I think so that they, partly because they knew she was a great worker at the nursery school, and partly I'm sure it was to send a message to other people that this was going to be a lesbian who was in charge of essentially the PTA at the nursery school.
I wanted to ask another question, actually, of everyone on the panel, and then invite folks if you'd like to. It's easiest just to sort of queue up behind the microphone, or maybe grab a seat next to it while you're waiting on folks. This was something that I had the chance to watch the film before and had impressed me a great deal about it, including seeing it the second time, about how much the struggle for a lot of the parents in the film was which communities they now take part in, like Johnny and his partner becoming involved with a Pentecostal family that they hadn't expected, and much like you said, being brought closer to a lot of maybe your straight peers than you would have been previously. And I wondered, for each of you, which communities have you felt drawn into by becoming parents, and which communities have you felt that has been more difficult to take part in, both the lesbian and gay community as well as other communities that you may have taken part in?
Well, the Catholic Church didn't want us. I can tell you that. That was I don't know.
I think that there's been struggles with both communities. I think, speaking for myself, sometimes I get overwhelmed. I've been in several mothers groups. I'm the parent that's home full time. I left work when we adopted our third child, and I had a baby, so I joined a mothers group to be with other people with children at home. And after a couple of years, and then had 2 more infants after that, I started to really feel, I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but neglected as a gay man, that I was always with straight women. And kind of got sick of being included on girls' night out all the time, even though some of my best friend, this is going to sound great, some of my best friends are straight women. Some of them are my best friends, but I started to feel like I didn't belong anymore when I was always going out, girls' night out, even though we had many of the same issues in our relationships and raising our children and feeling unappreciated. But I felt differently. I added a whole nother dynamic as a gay man. I didn't really feel like I had the same support. At the same token, when I hang out with my gay friends, either lesbian or gay men, I felt like I didn't fit anymore in many ways, because I would find myself purposely not talking about my children because I didn't want that to be the main part of the night. But then all of the things that really have taken over with my life involve my kids or the school system or the neighborhood. So it put me in a weird position. I can have fun with my friends, but I guess there was always something inside thinking, I really don't belong to either community anymore. It's kind of a looking for a new community, and we don't have the resource of belonging to a group of gay dads. That's not happening where we live. So
we had to create that in a similar vein. When I was pregnant with our first child, I said to my OB that I'd like to see if we could find a childbirth class where we weren't the only lesbian couple, because even though I don't mind being out about lesbian matters in my professional life and my chosen world, something so vulnerable as giving birth, I just really didn't want to have everybody staring at us and going, oh, that's what lesbians are like when they interact, when they're nervous, when they're about to give birth, etc. So lo and behold, he found not just a childbirth class with one other lesbian couple, he found an all-lesbian childbirth class. And after that, and my partner's initial reaction when I told her about this was, well, I don't know these people. I have nothing in common with them. I said, well, actually, you do. Thereafter, we decided to make a point of socializing with these other lesbian couples on a regular basis, every other month, just so that our kids would always have other lesbian couples, other gay couples around them, so that when they started to ask the inevitable questions, we could say, well, look, Anya has 2 moms, and Ben has 2 moms, and Ari has 2 moms, and they would always have that as a part of their lives.
Ironically, we have a strong community of adoptive families, and we couldn't all be any different, ranging from 2 Jewish couples in our neighborhood that have both adopted from China, straight couples that have adopted, all different ranges of children. No other gay couples, though, living where we live, but several. Our children are with several families of adopted makeups.
I actually had a question for Arlene. I think that there's a notion amongst gay men that for lesbian women, this is old hat, that the lesbian community has sort of been out ahead in terms of raising children. I wondered if that's something that you have experienced within the lesbian community. Is the prevalence of lesbian mothers really that high, or is it also, do you have the same experience that Steve mentioned of, well, when I'm out with my gay friends, I'm with them because that's what we share, not the fact that we're parents?
Well, I'm going to give away my age here, but I'll admit that 20 years ago when I first told my lesbian friends that I wanted to have kids, they did look at me like I was somewhat akin to mad. Since that time, I think in the mid-'80s, there was a wonderful film by Deborah Chasnoff called Choosing Children. And I never forgot a wonderful scene in it in which they're asking the child of some lesbian parents what it was like, were there any downsides to having lesbian parents? And one of the kids thought for a minute and then proffered the answer, you have to go to a lot of meetings. And I remember watching that and thinking, that's going to be my kid. So, and it's become increasingly common now, and the Gayby boom and the lesbian baby boom has been out and about for a while. And I think in part by virtue of the fact that it's arguably easier for us to pull it off than it is our gay male brothers.
A question also for Steve and Bill. You mentioned that 3 of your children are African American, and that was an issue that was fairly prominent in the film. What it's like for parents to raise children that are not of the same race as themselves. And I wondered if it's been what experiences you've had in trying to help your kids connect with either African American classmates or a larger African American community, and has that been easy? Has that been something that has been difficult? And what role has your being gay parents played in that?
It's ironic in that film, the Pentecostal grandmother, quote unquote, we were laughing because it's the same thing with our son Ben, our first. He was in a foster home for a couple of years before we adopted him, and the white is Jehovah's Witness, kind of the same background, very much. They don't accept gay people in their family, in their religion. But when they met us, very, very open to us, and she's remained in our lives. We get together with her at least once or twice a year. She's met all our kids. We're a big part of her family. She's got a large extended family. We have spent family day with them. So we're lucky to have her, that African-American presence in our life. Although it is an issue where we live. It's basically a white suburb. There are some children of color in their schools, but we continue to struggle with that one.
When you go through the adoption process through the state of Massachusetts, the training is the MAPS training, Massachusetts Approach to Partnership and Parenting. And there's a huge training on diversity and interracial adoption. I also, my background, I'm a licensed social worker, so I had obviously done a lot of work in diversity. Everything we were taught and everything I learned through social work could never prepare you to be a white man in this society and raising a black child. It's overwhelming. It's embarrassing. One of the things I tell people, one of the most poignant moments of being a parent is sitting down with your 10-year-old black son to explain to him what racism is as a white person. Or when your black son asks you why the black people didn't want him, is that why he was adopted by white people? It's difficult. And we do a lot of soul searching and we do a lot of thinking before we answer questions, and we often leave things left with questions sometimes we don't have the answers to.
I think one of the things that helps you as gay men answering these questions is you can talk about the prejudice that gay people experience and still experience in the some of the struggles we went through. It's not quite the same thing, but it does give you a sense of empathy and coming from a place where you can understand just being judged by who you are and nothing what you did is just, the luck of the draw. And I think that, especially for our two older ones, that there is some resonance there. You can tell when you talk to them about it that they understand. So, but it's an issue.
I think sometimes that, as was referenced in the film, some of us, this isn't on the race issue as it is on the gay straight issue, bear an extra burden when we're parents about our kids being not totally like other kids. They showed the scene about the two gay men who were nervous when their son showed a proclivity towards liking high heels. And I remember when our daughter, our first, was 4 years old, and she was at nursery school and came home one day and announced to us that boys are poison. And we went into an absolute panic because we were afraid everybody was going to think we had taught her that. And so we started saying, oh, no, we like boys. Boys are good. We like boys. We went to nursery school the next day, and we were comparing notes with the other moms at nursery school, and they were like, oh, yeah, my daughter says that too. No big deal. All the girls hate boys at this age. But we were insistent that she could not say that boys are poison. The poor kid. It was just developmentally appropriate.
That's true. That's funny.
Well, one of the things that I'm not a parent myself, but I've always wondered, because I actually don't know child development stages very well. I never had younger siblings or things. But at what ages did you, and I know some of your children were not raised from infancy, so at what ages did you begin to try and explain to your children that you were gay or lesbian, and how did you go about giving them an understanding of what that meant?
We haven't told them yet.
And they don't know they're adopted either.
Yeah, make sure they don't watch TV on June 10th.
I tell them all the time that Bill's a woman. We started right from the very beginning. I wanted, in some ways, we were lucky. Adopting Ben was pretty close to 5.5, and it was very easy to talk about. There are all different kinds of families, and we used all of the issues of two dads, black, white, the whole bit. So it was pretty open right from the beginning that things were different and that families can be made up of one parent, two parents, grandparents, and that sometimes two women and two men can love each other. So I guess that I felt lucky that it was really put out there with our oldest child at an age of understanding, age-appropriately understanding, that it kind of unfolded more naturally as the rest of the children joined our family.
Well, it's interesting, too, our now 10-year-old, when he was, I think, 7, told me talking about a friend in school, and he said that his friend had two dads. And I said, oh, well, I didn't know this. Well, it turns out that this boy's parents were divorced and his mother remarried, so he has two dads. And very interesting. I had never thought of that before. There's all kinds of two-dad families out there and two-mom families.
We had brought our first to gay pride, at my insistence, to gay pride parades. I figured that was a good way of getting her used to the meetings she'd be going to later in life. No, not really. But I thought it would be fun, and of course she thought it was fun for all the wrong reasons. She got necklaces and balloons. And so I thought that we had done all the things that would make our daughter very comfortable, including my going to the nursery school and reading to her class, Heather has two mommies. And when I asked the kids if they had any questions, they all raised their hands at the ripe old age of 4 and said, oh, we have two moms too. And I turned to the teacher and said, they do? And the teacher goes, nah. So I thought we were right on the right path until recently, when my daughter admitted that she was afraid she would never be cool because, among other things, her parents were gay and everyone else was straight. And it kind of broke my heart. On the one hand, I wanted to say, oh, honey, you're going to be so cool, you just don't know it. But on the other hand, it broke my heart for her to think that. And shortly thereafter, we went to a function of gay and lesbian parents at our school, at which one of her teachers was able to attend, someone who actually is here this evening. And she was so thrilled to learn that one of her teachers was gay. All the things we had said to her to make her feel good were clearly totally meaningless until her teacher walked into the room, and she was able to say, my teacher is gay. And it was so meaningful to her that this person, this authority figure, was validating that she and her family were all right that even I, who should have known better, being involved in gay and lesbian politics, didn't realize how powerful that would be for a child.
I'll give folks a sort of gentle warning that we've got a few minutes left. I did want to also ask folks, because this is something that one of the other, along with sort of the quote-unquote Gayby boom, huge trends that we are seeing in the LGBT community right now is people identifying as gay or lesbian or bisexual, transgendered at a much younger age. And whereas I think folks used to put off consideration of, well, is my child that way or not, until they were maybe in their teens or 20s, or they never even occurred to them. I wondered for you folks if that's a concern that's been raised by other folks to you, or how you think about that issue of your own children's sexuality as they, especially now some of them have sort of entered their teens. How do you try to, set positive role models for them and also help them to sort of find their own way?
We often joked in the very beginning when people would, we've spoken on adoption panels for so long now, people always ask that question or alluded to that question, what if one of your kids is gay? We've always responded by saying, well, we've decided and talked about that we'll love our children even if they're straight. However, and I don't know if I'll ever want my children to see this film. We suspect that one of our children is going to be gay. All of the signs that everybody picks up on, usually not usually the parents, it's everybody else. And then when that person comes out years later, oh yeah, we knew when you were 10 or we knew when you were 12. And we've talked about it and never thought it would bother us, but as more things develop, I think we're going through the same process as any parent does. We're wondering if we're going to be able to support, them in the right way. I would say internal homophobia, wondering are other people going to point the finger and say that we did this? Is it our fault? Is it something we did? Intellectually knowing that that's not true, but it's been an interesting process as we talk about it and how he sometimes behaves, how we go, oh, we cringe when he acts a certain way in public, and then we say, oh my God, he's getting half of this from us anyway. So it's a very interesting process. And we've had, obviously being gay parents, people involved in the family, relatives as well as friends, been able to comment on, oh my God, you're raising a big queen. We laugh about that people feel comfortable saying it to us, but it's still a process. It's not any, I want to say it's a little bit easier already being gay, but it's still part of parenting who you kind of have your mind made up who your kids are going to be, and they never become that who they're going to be. Right.
Well, and it's a painful process, and adolescence sucks. No matter, I don't care what you end up being and what you're going through at the time, it sucks. And to have that on top of everything else, it's hard. And you just, as a parent, you're just like, oh, you want everything to be easier for your child than it was for you, and you can't control that. Well, what we can control is just be hell of a lot more understanding than my parents ever were.
We have those same plastic high heels that they showed in the movie in our house. We have two daughters, but right now they get the most wear from our 16-year-old son and our 3-year-old son. So they both love those plastic high heels. We laugh all the time when we hear them coming down the hall, wondering which person's going to have them on. And it's not usually one of the two girls, which is kind of funny.
Well, your kids have a big head start by the fact that you have big queen in your vocabulary. My mother only knew flaky, and that I never really quite understood what she meant when she said that of me. So I do want to hold to Tom's promise to let folks be out by 8:15. So I did want to thank the folks on the panel for participating with us. Also, one quick thing, it's a plug for Bay Windows, but I also wanted to mention is on our website, which is www.baywindows.com, we did do a large profile of Bill and Steve some time ago. If you just go there and type in any of their names in the search function, you can read a little bit more about them and see pictures of them and their family as well. And if you type in Arlene, she'll come up a bazillion times, but mostly about the legislature. So
I actually have pictures with me if anybody would like to see our children.
I think Andrew was so skillful, actually, at sort of facilitating this conversation that we do actually have about 5 minutes left. So if anybody... But I did really sense that people were sort of liking the interview style thing going on. I'm going to remember that for future programs. But I wonder if there are any burning questions. Now is the time to ask them. We got a couple of minutes left. Anybody want to?
And we won't be
come on up to that microphone.
Anything you ask.
Anybody else want to queue up right now? One more? Okay.
I just had a question. I have an uncle who's gay and has adopted 2 children from Mexico, and I was wondering, like, what role that you would like your family to take in, like, supporting your children and you through this process?
The one thing that every gay and lesbian parent wants is for their family to treat them and their kids like they do everyone else, and if you do that for them, you will be giving them them and their children the best blessing of all, to validate the normalcy of their love.
Their birthdays, send them a card, you give them a big hug, you're their aunt or your whatever, would you be the cousin or their aunt? Cousin, and you love them to death, and you want to be part of their family and make sure that they're embraced by your extended family too.
Offer to babysit.
Yes.
That's very important.
Thank you.
I think this is a simple question. If you could only say one thing to a gay person who came up to you and said, I'd really like to adopt a child or somehow become a parent, what would it be? And do you think it would be any different from what you would say to a straight person who asked you the same question?
I would say do it.
And I would say do it, and I don't think it would be different. First, gay or straight.
I would say it's the most exhaustingly wonderful thing I've ever done in my life, and I think it is more difficult for us, but in a way that it is if you're any member of an other group. I'm Jewish and was raised in a community that had been the headquarters of the American Nazi Bund a mere 10 years before I was born. So my parents knew we were growing up in arguably hostile territory, but they would never consider not being parents because of that. And straight folks often ask gay people, well, aren't you worried that people are going to discriminate against your kids? But you never say that to a black person who lives in a racist society. Why would you have children knowing that it's a racist society? And in the same way, we gays and lesbians have to be prepared for the fact that it's a homophobic society. But just like every other minority group, we can get through it if you teach your kids the right things.
Thank you.